Yeah, we're here today. Welcome to CBA, ArtFlakes in particular. Good morning to everyone watching us live from here. Today, we'll be dealing with one very important aspect of literature in another very important country in Africa. Not only in Africa, but in East Africa. Not only in East Africa, but in all of Africa. Which country is that? That is Sudanese Sudan. Sudan and the Sudanese literature. We're going to be exploring these two together. And today, as usual, I've got one of my guests, and it's Umar Osabo. Umar Osabo is on the other part of the studio, and we shall be discussing together the Sudanese literature, both the Southern Sudan and the Republic of Sudan. Don't go away. This is ArtFlakes. Good morning, East Africa. Welcome to Good Morning, East Africa on CBA TV. Here we are having a show, a very unique show today, which is called ArtFlakes. ArtFlakes is a show where we talk about different literary world of different nations across the globe. But this time around, we're still focusing on East Africa. Until we finish exploring the entire East Africa, we will not go to another part of the world, because it's very important that we explore all these units before we get to outside of the region or the sub-region. As usual, today we're going to be going deeply into the Sudanese literature, both the Southern Sudan and the Northern Sudan. And we'll be exploring this in detail, not only with me, but with one of my usual guests, Umar Osabo. Thank you for joining me today to talk about the Sudanese literature. I hope we can deeply explore this, because Sudan is very hot nowadays. It's very hot, you know, very hot. Very hot. Politically, literally, and others. And otherwise, yes. So I think we'll be. So please, let's go deeply into this country. What do you know about Sudan? Where is it located?
Yes.
How is it?
Sudan is a very great country located in the East Africa.
Okay.
It has a neighbor with Chad, Central African Republic, Eritrea, Uganda, Kenya, among others.
Okay.
The country is has experienced series of colonization that ranges from the Arab to the English, and it has a lot of political activities which along the line led to the breakup of the country into what we have today as the Southern Sudan and Republic of Sudan.
Thank you so much. One thing I also found out, even from the name Biladu Sudan, because that's the etymology. If you look at Sudan, the land of Africa, the land of the black, why do you think this place is unique among other African or East African countries? The countries you've mentioned now, you mentioned Ethiopia, Eritrea, Kenya, Uganda, etc. like that, even Somalia, you know, though it may not be directly or indirectly border with Ethiopia, but once you enter Ethiopia, automatically you're in Somalia too, or Somaliland. So why is this country so unique?
Yes, like an average Arab person, when you talk about Africa, what first comes to his mind is Sudan. Because they believe Sudan is the ancestral home of most African people. And that is why today most African tribes or languages are tracing their origin to Sudan in one way or the other. So Sudan is generally known as the land of the black, because for instance, Bilal al-Sudan, that is the land of the blacks.
Bilad al-Sudan.
Bilad al-Sudan, that's the land of the black, which is generally known to be a country that has a huge history. And this history dates back to the medieval ages and down to the time of the prophet and even up to tomorrow. So this has in a way affected their history, their culture, even their literary works. So most literary work from this part of the country seems to be tilted or tilted towards the Arab literature. Yes, and history, culture, and what have you.
Yeah, there's also one thing you mentioned at the beginning. You were saying that they have two parts now, that they parted recently in the 20th century. Can you tell me about these two parts, the Southern Sudan, particularly their colonial history? What makes them different in terms of language, in terms of religion, etc., like that?
Yes, you know, at a point in time, or at the beginning, Sudan is 80–90% Muslim. But along the line, as history have it, there was a period where the English conquered Egypt. So after the conquer of Egypt, the English also took over part of Sudan, or the Sudan in general. Later, the Muslim got back the country, and it was under the Muslim rule, the Arab rule. Then during this period, they introduced Christianity and what have you. Then along the line, when crisis started in that part of the country, the people were separated. When they separated, they now have what we call the Southern Sudan, which they have English as their official language, and the Republic of Sudan, which they have Arabic and their native language as their official language. So when you look at the historical antecedent of the people, you will see that they have series or different types of or kinds of colonization. The one from Egypt, the one from the core Arab, Middle East, and the one from the English. So today, most people in the South Sudan, even if they understand English, they prefer to speak the Arabic. And in fact, like some of their great writers, despite that they have gone to the West to study, they have the mastery of the language, but they still want to speak in Arabic language or write in Arabic language because of the attachment to the Arab people. So for an average Arab man, once you talk about Africa, the first thing that comes to his mind is Sudan. So Sudan is a very, very unique country in East Africa. Yes.
You have talked about two foreign influences.
Yes.
Two foreign, either religious or political influences. You've talked about the influence of the West, particularly the American government, on the southern parts, and you talk about the influence of the Arab generally on the northern part that is called Republic of Sudan today. What about the influence of Ethiopia government or the Ethiopians on the southern Sudan? Because that is external. But because I believe from history, we've got in the past, so these areas, this region, were referred to as the Ethiopian Empire, you know, the empire of the Abasha. So there was no border at that time, and it cut across some of those areas. So what can you say about the influence of Ethiopians on the life of the Sudanese?
What happened to the Ethiopian is not far from what happened from other parts of Africa or other parts of the world. For instance, the Caribbean, the East Africa, the North Africa, the West Africa, and what have you. At a point in time or in history, Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, and a part of Djibouti and all that, they were all under Ethiopia. They were all regarded as Abasha. But because of the colonial interest in Africa, particularly with emphasis to Sudan, the country were splitted. For instance, the Francophone, the American, the British, and what have you, the Italians. So led to during the scrambling petition of the African countries. So it led to the creation of smaller states. But however, the history and cultural attachment or closeness of the Ethiopians and so the Ethiopians and the Sudanese is still very, very relevant.
In terms of their dress.
In terms of their dress, the food, and what have you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So let's go into their literature. We've just explored the country in general. What can you say about the Sudanese literature generally?
Okay.
Yeah.
Like I've said in my opening episode, their literature is mostly oral.
Okay.
Because of before the advent of writing, they were mostly composing oral poetry.
Okay.
Then later, through the Arab traders or through the Arab trans-Saharan trade, the Arab were able to come into Sudanese, or the part they call Ethiopia or Habasha, as the case may be. So they came and people started writing. They were writing in a colloquial, or like we say in Nigeria, pidgin English. So in a
colloquial Arabic.
In a colloquial Arabic. So they started writing in colloquial Arabic until the modern time, where they started writing in original Arabic. So even those that have the ability or the mastery of English language, that they could ordinarily write in English or other language like French, because from history, from their record, we're able to know that some of them have gone to study in France, in British, in America, and what have you. But when they come back home, they prefer to write in Arabic because they want to see themselves close or the same with the Arab people, perhaps because of the Islamic influence, the Islamic culture. So maybe they think if they write in Arabic, that will make them and Arab to be more close and tighten the relationship.
One other thing I also found out is the fact that before 1820, 21 like that, they focused majorly on poetry. No, there was no drama, no novel, nothing related to other genres of literature. What do you think could have led to this? Why focusing only on poetry alone before 1821?
Okay, if I want to do justice to this, permit me to quote a book by the name National and Sudanese Poetry by a great scholar, Al-Bash Bashroom. In this book, the writer tries to look at a period called Funjda Sultani. Funjda Sultani is a period where the Arab conquered the Sudan, the Sudanese people, and they introduced Islam, they introduced their culture. So at a point in time, perhaps for some political reason, economic reason, the emotion and psychology of an average Sudani is poetry. So poetry is all over in the air. Poetry is all over in their heart. They think poetry, they act poetry, and they mostly write poetry. Then,
so that means that because of their Arabic influence, because if you look at some of the countries that we have toured around, as Djibouti, you talk about Ethiopia, we talk about the Somali literature. These areas, this Horn of Africa in particular, had this common thing together, poetry. So is it because of the influence of the Arab? Because Arabian words, they are more of oracy, their skills, when it comes to speaking, they are very sound in that. And you can see in their literature, if you want to beat Arab word in the area of literature, don't go into the area of poetry. Maybe drama, maybe prose. But to talk about poetry, I think they will finish you. I don't think they have a significant influence on the Horn of Africa generally. Because Sudan is also part of the Horn of Africa.
Yes, I think they have. Because people who are not lettered, because conventional writing came to the Arab world late, with the coming of Islam and other historical perspective that I wouldn't want time may not permit us to go into. Is a fact that any person, even in any part of the world, any person that cannot speak and write, you will see him, he will articulate, he will have most of his ideas stored in his memory. So this is not far from what replay or is replaying itself in Eritrea, in Djibouti, in Ethiopia, and other African or East African country we talked about. So it is a fact that not just the Arab, so also the Persian. The Persian also have great influence on the literature of Sudan. For instance, there is this important poetry called the Dubbed. Dubbed is a Persian poetry translated into Arabic literature. You know, there is this intertextual relationship between the literature of one part of the world and another part, between one country and another. Just like the French and the English, the Germans and the Americans, the Caribbeans and the Africans, and so on and so forth. So they introduced the Persian. They introduce this kind of writing called Dubbed. Dubbed is generally referred to as a rubaiyat. A rubaiyat is a Persian quatrain that is a kind of a four-line poem that it musical in nature. Sometimes they use it to sing and all that during ceremony, lyrical and what have you. So this is a very, very fundamental aspect of literary works, particularly poetry of the Sudanese people. You've been talking about the time you were talking about is around 1504 and 1821. That is the Fuja Sultanate time you're talking about. Let's look at the modern time, the modern literature, particularly the modern poetry. There are a lot of scholars, a lot of writers, particularly the poets, because before you can transit to modern time, something you are used to is what you get in with. Then you can now mix it with what you finally find in the system in the new era. What can you say about some of these Sudanese writers? Yes, between 1930s and 1940s, we've seen a new breed of poets like Tijani Yusuf, Idris Jama, Hamza Al-Malik. They all emerge. In fact, it is at this period that the Sudan people begin to have the kind of recognition they want from the Arab world. For instance, one famous singer of Egypt by name Kulthum, she adapt or use one of the poems of a great Sudanese writer by name Hadi Adam. And the title of the poem is Shall I See You Tomorrow? She used it in her music. It is from this period that the Arab world started to recognize, appreciate the work of the Sudanese poets. In particular. Yes, in particular.
So what about, you've just talked about the poetry. What about other genres of literature?
Yes, other genres of literature started later. Which the influence of the other genres of literature, for instance, like short stories and prose and novel, or what we call novel, started much more later. Though when it started, the poetry tries, or the writings, the short stories and the novel, when they started, for instance, one great critic of Sudan by name Fuad Morsi criticized the writing of this country that a lot of them do not seem to romanticize the current political or socio-cultural experience, but they went back to the medieval or centuries back, and to him, he does not see any resemblance between what Sudan used to be in those period or in that period with the present. According to him, they should have weaved or write stories that will reflect the current political and socio-cultural experience of the people.
And one thing I also found out is the fact that, you see, when they were transiting, the modern literature got a complete revolution when they broke away. The southern part broke away from because if you create a nation, of course you're going to create the literature of that nation. Automatically the literature of the nation will change completely. You know, the Southern Sudan or Southern Sudanese ended up creating their own literature because there was no literature specifically for them.
Yeah.
So writers started coming in, and since they have got their own official language as English, so they needed to write more in English language. So they were writing based on their experience, perhaps because the exploitation on the part of the North they've experienced before they finally got their independence, supported by the United States. I mean, anyway, though they're still facing some challenges today, which we will discuss about this in detail later when we start exploring the text. But what you'll find out is that the other genres of literature also came in with the political change in that country. There was only Sudan. There was nothing like Southern Sudan. But when that came in, they needed to write. And poetry was not enough for them to narrate everything.
Novel and short
story. So they added to display on stage what had happened to them before. They also decided to go into narration of their experience within themselves and outside. Their refugee experience either in Ethiopia or in Kenya. And you cannot put that in, your emotion
cannot
tackle that in detail.
Unless if you try to write.
Yeah, yes. That's why they also do translation of even the northern writers. Some of them wrote in Arabic because of the influence of the Arab units then, the northern parts, which is now Republic of Sudan. So I can see, generally speaking, if you look at this, what you find out is that their political experience seriously affects their writing.
Yes, if I may take from coming from here. You see, literature is a mirror of the society.
Yeah.
It's a precipitation of people culture, their ideas about life, what they think about themselves, what they want to do, and how they want to do it, where they want to get to. This is what you find generally from, for instance, the English literature, from the Old English to medieval to the Renaissance and First World War, Second World War poetry. This is what you will find generally. For instance, when you read the work of writers like T.S. Eliot, when you read the work of writers of John Milton,
those are English,
George Herbert, you will see that it mirrors all the writings of Shakespeare, who is regarded as the great politic historian.
That is for English. I will not agree with you that part, because if you go into the exploration of Arabian literature, you will know that Shakespeare is nowhere to be found when it comes to literature.
I'm trying to relate the English literature with what has happened in Sudan. Before and now that we have two different states, the Southern Sudan and the Republic of Sudan. So the same thing is replaying itself. The fact that these people have more attachment to the English or to the Americans, there is no two ways. They will be influenced more by the literary works from that part of the world. And that is why we have some of their work immediately after the breakup. They started translating their work into English, not Arabic. And the new breed of writers have also started writing in English instead of Arabic. And they started paying more attention to the English or the American literature instead of the usual Arabic literature.
Like Traveling with Jean by Jamal Majoub.
Like the Traveling of Jean. You know, in the Traveling of Jean, Travel with Jean by Jamal Majoub. You see, it's very, very interesting work, because the work chronicles a boy experience from Sudan to the Western world, where he went for study, the challenges he faced, and all that. You see, there's this great concept, the concept of hybridity. Hybridity is a concept in literature that enables you to discuss the literature of one country side by side with another. Or for instance, a black guy from Africa, he gets married to a white lady from Canada or wherever. So there's hybridity. So that is the child that we have is hybridized child. So also happen, the same thing replay itself in the literary work of some places. For instance, if you read the work of Ngugi, you see the reflection of this. When you read the work of Shoyinka from West Africa, you see the reflection of that. So also, Traveling with Jane by Jamal Moju is a typical representation of a literary work that has to do with hybridity, trying to mirror their pre-colonial, post-colonial, and in relationship or in the light of their attachment to the Western world.
So what can you say about the influence of their Asian tradition on their literature, and particularly their short stories, their general write-up that they finally got into when they got to the modern time?
Yes. Around between the 1930s and 1940, there was this huge attachment to the past instead of writing literary works that will mirror
the present. Okay.
But after that period, I think there was no issue from the review of so many literary works from that part of and criticism from that part of the world, that is Sudan. After the 1930s and 1914, they no longer have the problem of that attachment with their past. So they start, their work begin to romanticize the present. Yes.
So in a nutshell, could you please just touch some of these authors, the modern authors that have got a lot of influence, particularly not only in poetry, but also in the aspect of short stories, in the aspect of drama, etc. like that, among these Sudanese?
Well, the first I would like to talk about is Taif Sali, who wrote Season of Migration to the North. In fact, Season of Migration of the North is among the 5 most important literary works in Arabic or in Arab literature. For instance, in 2001, a very prominent literary school in Damascus, they have said and they have reviewed the Season of Migration to the North, and they say it is the most important literary work of this century or of the last century. So also we have writers like Show What and So What. Show What and So What is also another very, very important play written by a very prominent Southern Sudanese playwright. It is a work that also mirrors their experience from the days of Egypt colonization to the days of English colonization, and in contrast with the present. So it's also a very great work. Another work is They Pour Fire on Us from the Sky by Benjamin Ajak.
That should be from the south.
That's from the south. It's also from the south. It's also another very, very important work. And we also have Tariq Al-Tayyib, Cities Without Palms. City Without Palm is also another very great work from that part of the world.
So generally speaking, if you look at the content of the modern literature, what they talk about, one thing you cannot remove from that is traveling, moving from one place to another, either to Ethiopia or to Kenya or to Egypt. And coming up with a way of getting out of the continent, maybe move to Europe. You know, there are more of these travelers. They believe in moving. Why do you think that they were moving just like that? Is it that their home was not peaceful for them?
Yes, a lot of factors could make a man move from one place to another.
Yeah.
One, firstly, if there is a political unrest in your country, of course, everyone values his life. Yeah. He wouldn't want to stay back where you know your life is not safe. So this is a reason why they move from one place to another. A second reason could be because of education. Yeah. Another reason could be because of their search for greener pasture, for better life. Like most of them, or some of them rather, school in the West. So some of them, they went to the West as refugees. Yeah. Some of them went to Ethiopia as refugees. Some of them went to Egypt as refugees, Kenya as refugees, and they end up schooling there. So they end up comparing their home or their country home, their country experience, Sudan, with those countries they find themselves. That is why I talk about hybridity earlier on. So it's a normal phenomenon. For instance, I am here today. This is not my country home. There are reasons, or there is a reason why I'm here. Probably to work, to base, to school, or any other thing that will make me leave my home and come to that place. So no man will just move away from home without reason to do so. So this is not far from
even the scriptures say, La yastawil qa'iduna wal mujahiduna fi sabilillah. You cannot compare those who sit at home and those who struggle in the cause of God. And learning itself is also a struggle. It's part of the struggle. So if you decide to move out to learn or to do some other thing, exposure, travel is also a lesson or an exposure on its own. So travel is life to some people. And the Sudanese are no exception when it comes to these parts. So in a nutshell, we shall be discussing in detail the texts. We're going to identify some texts, the Sudanese texts. We're going to go deeper into this. Some of these common things that we have discussed about from their history, from 12,000 BC up to today, that we discussed about today. We'll be looking at some of their texts that are related to that. The poetry, the prosaic work, and perhaps maybe drama, though it's not common. They don't have some of these dramatic texts, but they have more of this poetry, even in modern time. If you remember recently, Umar Bashir was stepped down, and if you notice, the protest took about more than like 2 months. They kept on protesting until they finally got there. One of the most prominent protesters among them is Allah Salah. Allah Salah was standing on the car, you know, gingering the spirit of the protesters with poetry. You know, that's to tell you how powerful poetry is, particularly in the Arab or Horn of African world. So we shall be discussing about this in detail. I think we're about to just close this part.
There's something very important. I think there's a lot to learn from the Arab poetry, particularly the Arab protest poetry, which we've done some work on it in the past. Some of this poetry were not written today. For instance, Ahmed Nagim, some of his poems were sung in Morocco, where he's from Egypt. For instance, Mahmoud Darwish, though he spent larger part of his life in Egypt, but his poems were chanted and recited in Sudan, in Morocco.
We've also talked about even the Sudanese.
So poetry,
whose work was sung by someone in Egypt.
Just like what David Cook once said, that the poets are the legislatures of the world. So poems and the poets are not just ordinary people. Sometimes
we shall discuss about this in detail, because we're almost we're out of time already. By the time we meet again, we shall be discussing about some of the work of the Sudanese writers. Don't go away. This is CBA ArtFlakes. Thank you so much for viewing, and we shall meet again to discuss about the Sudanese literature. Thank you.